Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, October 3rd, 2020, and today we're going to be talking about a 2020 Senate election prediction. So we're 31 days until the election, so we're the entire month of October up until November 3rd, and it looks like we're going to be seeing a number of different things about this election. With Trump's diagnosis of COVID-19 on top of numerous senators, it is possible that the Supreme Court nomination vote gets pushed out at least 2 weeks. Now, these senators can be attending the hearings virtually, but they cannot vote virtually. They will need to be on the Senate floor. And I believe today we've hit 4 senators on the Republican side who have tested positive, and assuming that they follow through with a 2-week quarantine, they will not be able to vote on this for at least 2 weeks. And that's not even counting possibly some other senators who may test today or test tomorrow as positive for COVID-19. But first of all, we're going to move away from the Halloween filter. If you guys want it, comment it down below, but right now we're going to revert back to the standard dark just because it is a little bit more pleasing to the eye, and maybe at the end of the video I'll flash back on the Halloween one just to give it a little bit of a festive spirit. But looking at this map, the Senate is super important for both sides. The Supreme Court and court packing seems to be an issue that are important to both Republicans and Democrats. They are going to be sure and they are going to make sure that if Ruth Bader Ginsburg is replaced, it is very possible that they do end up nominating someone as a 10th or 11th justice to the Supreme Court. Now, that hasn't been confirmed by the Biden campaign, nor has he denied it completely. So that is a possibility for Democrats. And we have seen calls from some very national Democrats that have said, you know what, court packing may be our only option. Everything is on the table. Even the Senate Democratic Party held a meeting where they said if Ruth Bader Ginsburg is confirmed, everything is on the table if we take power. We referring to the Democratic Party, I guess you could say if they take power. And the Republicans say, you know what we will do is we will do the same exact thing the next time we're in power. We'll court pack again, this time we referring to the Republican Party. But that's just a whole number of issues. But the Senate is what really decides whether or not court packing can actually exist, because of the fact that the Supreme Court is not outlined in the Constitution that says you need 9 seats. That has just been a precedent that has been set for centuries. It is possible that precedent is broken. And, you know, I don't think a lot of Democrats would think that would be a negative thing. If there's already a 6-3 majority on the Supreme Court in favor of conservatives, they're probably going to want to do anything they can to undo that. So let's take a look at these safe states. There aren't too many notable safe states, but as you can see, there are a number of swing states. For the Democrats, they have Virginia and New Hampshire, according to my most recent prediction, out of states that are traditionally swing states. But I'm now going to be moving Tina Smith's seat in Minnesota back into the safe Democratic column. She's expected to win anywhere from 14 to 16% of the vote here. I'm thinking she's going to end up on the upper hand. I believe that Joe Biden is going to do very well in this state. And Tina Smith and Senate candidates in Minnesota typically outrun their Democratic colleagues that are running for president. But 44 seats for the Democrats in the safe column, 39 for the GOP. I think it's a little surprising seeing a number of safe Republican seats on the presidential level considered toss-ups on the Senate level. That's just due to the fact that these races have pretty much just been forced to be likely or lean by the Democratic Party, if that's the best word for it. They've spent so much money in states like Kansas and South Carolina and Alabama that they are super competitive this election cycle, and definitely need to be noticed, because they may be normally safe on the presidential level, but on the Senate level, they are very close. Now, I actually made a mistake. There are not 39 safe Republican seats. There are 40. I am moving the characterization of Kentucky from likely Republican to safe Republican. Mitch McConnell is likely to run up the numbers there. I already was expecting him to win by anywhere from 12 to 13%. We're looking at a 15 point victory for Mitch McConnell. I'm thinking he ends up on the higher end of that. And now this race is considered safe for Mitch McConnell. I understand Amy McGrath is a strong candidate on her own, but she has a lot of money, but it's all going to be pretty much to no avail, because this race, it's still Kentucky. If Allison Lonergan Grimes couldn't do it, if it couldn't happen in 2008, it's probably not going to happen in 2020. Now, things could change in the final month of the campaign season, but right now, Kentucky, safe for the GOP. Let's move over into likely states. These are states that are pretty solid for their respective political parties, and actually, it comes down to a point where now it probably won't change over the next month. Something drastically would have to change in these races in order to overturn the trajectory of them. But we'll just go with them. And it is possible that some of these states end up flipping. There have been likely states in the past that ended up going to the opposition party, but that would just be a very extreme scenario, and things would have to be completely different in the final stretch of the campaign season in order for that to happen. But as it stands today, here are my likely Democratic states. So the first state is Michigan, not Mississippi, Michigan. Gary Peters is running here. John James, while some internal polls may show him tied or down by 1%, realistically, he's going to be losing this race by 6-7%, enough that it's characterized as likely. Michigan doesn't really have a chance of going for Donald Trump this election cycle either. If you take a look at the 538 forecast, Joe Biden has a better chance at winning South Carolina and Alaska than Donald Trump does at winning Michigan. So keep that in mind. Michigan has moved very far to the left for this election cycle. Its 16 electoral votes are easily going to Biden. It's easily going to be a re-election for Gary Peters there. The next likely Democratic state goes over to the West Coast, and that is the state of Arizona. This state went to the Democrats in 2018. This exact seat actually was John McCain's seat. He carried it 4 years ago by, I believe, 5 points larger than what Donald Trump won the state in 2016. It was a 9-point victory for McCain. And now, looks like it's on track to end up going to the Democrats. The reason why is because of Martha McSally. She turned this seat blue back in 2018. She lost against Kristen Sinema. And now, in this election cycle, it looks like she's turning this seat blue again. The Democrats ended up having 0 Senate seats in 2016 in Arizona to possibly ending 2020 with 2, at least 1. And Arizona is likely to go to the Democrats. Mark Kelley is running ahead of Martha McSally by very, very solid margins. The next likely Democratic state is the state of Colorado. This state is pretty solid for the Democratic Party. I will say that John Hickenlooper might get a smaller margin of victory than Mark Kelley in Arizona, but then again, Mark Kelley is doing very well, so that's a very high bar to meet. Cory Gardner has just been voting with Donald Trump and the Republican Party. Obviously, he's a Republican, but he's been voting with Donald Trump and the Republican Party a lot larger of a percent than what his constituents would like. I mean, they didn't even vote for Donald Trump in 2016, but it looks like he's on track to vote for the replacement of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and that would just be the final thing that seals his re-election bid, which puts the Democrats at a likely win in the state of Colorado. Again, I made another mistake. Sorry about this. New Mexico is solid for the Democrats. I can't believe I forgot that one. It does look a little bit weird considering it a toss-up, but New Mexico is solid for the Democrats, so that actually puts them at 48, but that's just likely seats. We can go ahead and characterize the the likely Republican seats now. So there are a pretty significant amount of likely Republican seats. We'll get started on them. I actually have some characterization changes that move some states into the likely Republican column or lean Republican column. We'll talk about that once we get there. But for the regular likely states that we normally characterize as likely, Texas, Mississippi is expected to be a 12 to 13 point victory for Cindy Hyde-Smith. It's not competitive, but it's going to be closer than 15%, which is why it's likely. I understand it may seem weird seeing Mississippi likely red, but likely could mean anywhere from 5 to 15%, and she's definitely on the upper hand. For Alabama, I think this one is also likely. What we've seen is that Doug Jones is probably going to narrow up the margin slightly. It's probably going to be a 6-7 point loss for Doug Jones, but you have to keep in mind he is a Democrat in a very solid Republican state. He only ran and won in 2017 against a supposed child molester. So Alabama, traditionally conservative state, Doug Jones only narrowly won just 3 years ago in 2017. He was the first Democrat in 25 years, and it will likely be the last Democrat to be elected in Alabama, at least for the foreseeable future. Alabama goes to Tommy Tuberville by a likely margin. The next state that I would consider to be likely for the GOP is the state of Alaska. This is a state where Dan Sullivan is going to have a mildly competitive race. I do think that this race will narrow down, but I still want to wait for a little bit more data, particularly with Alaska. I think that this race has the potential to be very, very close. I think Dr. Al Gross could definitely do well in this state, possibly a lean or even tilt loss. But as it stands today, I still want to wait on a little bit more data that actually pushes this state further, I guess, to the left, or at least to the independent column. And I do think that Alaska desperately needs polls to be done in that state, in the House race, in the Senate race, and the presidential race. So Alaska, I'm waiting on a little bit more data, but right now I'm characterizing it as likely for the GOP. He's probably going to win it by 6-7%, Dan Sullivan being he, but still has the potential to be much closer. Now, another state that we normally characterize as lean, this is a state that I'm moving into the likely Republican column, and that is the state of Kansas. Kansas, I believe, will move into the likely Republican column as we get closer to the election cycle. The Democratic Party has done very well here. Barbara Boyer has raised money that no other Senate candidate in the history of Kansas has ever seen. But then again, it's still Kansas. I mean, this is a traditionally Republican state. And now, while Roger Marshall may not be the best candidate, he's still a representative, and he's much better than Chris Kobach would have been. But right now, Barbara Boyer is expected to lose by a much smaller margin than what Joe Biden is expected to lose in the state of Kansas. We're seeing a 6-7 point margin of victory for the Republicans here. But as we get closer to the election day, the Republican and Democratic bases coalesce, and a lot less undecided voters reveal that Kansas will likely split to the GOP and give them a victory in that state. So that goes to the likely Republican column, and that puts the Republicans at 45. The remaining seats are now considered to be lean or tilt for a respective party. So let's talk about the tilt Republican states, or not the tilt Republican states, the lean Republican states first. I think this is worth noting. The Republican Party typically does well on Senate election levels. In the 2020 Senate elections, this map was not supposed to be good for Democrats whatsoever. If you take a look at the initial characterizations in January 2020, the Democratic Party was not even at a remotely competitive stance to take the Senate. Now, there were always hopeful situations, but nobody could have envisioned that Alaska, Kansas, South Carolina could be one of the closer races this election cycle. Nobody really would have envisioned that the Virginia GOP would have fielded a very bad candidate. Maybe they could have after the lackluster performances over the past couple of years, but if you said in 2016 that the Democrats would be safe in New Mexico and Minnesota, Virginia, and New Hampshire, and all of a sudden states such as South Carolina and Alaska and Montana were going to be competitive, you probably would have thought you were crazy. But, that's the reality of this election cycle. That's the reality of this year. Just a crazy year. And for the Republican Party, I do think that they do have a strong hold on some of these states. It's going to be lean. That includes the state of South Carolina. I think Lindsey Graham is going to win this race, but Jamie Harrison has shown us that he has turned this race from being solid for the GOP to likely to the GOP to lean for the GOP, possibly in the next month make it even toss-up. After Lindsey Graham said that he would be voting, or they should hold a vote on a possible Supreme Court nomination, the number of comments where he said if there is an opening and there's a vacancy in the final year of President Trump's term, his first term, they will wait until the next election, and then turning back on that was just immediate campaign fuel for Jamie Harrison. He was already performing well, and now he's performing even better. He's raising numbers that, has Lindsey Graham going on Fox News begging for money. And it looks like, Jamie Harrison is still out fundraising him. So South Carolina, lean for the GOP. That puts them at 46, but they have two more lean states. Let's go ahead and get there. They have another state that's considered lean. We can go ahead and get there, which is Montana. Now, this is a race that I'm moving over from tilt Republican to lean Republican. The reasoning, Steve Daines is likely to do better than Steve Bullock. Obviously, they're the only two on the ballot, but I think he's going to do a little bit better than if this election was held around a month ago. Yes, Supreme Court and abortion rights and gay rights are very important to the people in Montana. If you look at the percent of the population that approves of legalized abortions, yes, it's very high. But at the same time, when we're looking at the state of Montana, still a solid Republican state. A lean margin, a lean loss for the Democratic Party in Montana is very good. I mean, Steve Daines is an incumbent who was rated solid back in January. And yes, he is running against a governor, but governing is very different than legislating. So the Republicans win the state of Montana. That puts them at this 47, which means the Democratic Party is going to need to win 2 or 3 of the remaining toss-up seats to win the majority. The reason why they could possibly win 2 is if Joe Biden wins the presidency. There's a tiebreaker from what would be Vice President Kamala Harris, but that's all determined on the presidential election. If they want an outright majority, they will need 3 seats out of the remaining 5. Now, they are going to get 3. You are going to see this map end up 51 to 49, but let's go to those states. Georgia, both of the races I consider to be lean. Now, Georgia Senate special election, I've actually moved down into the lean Republican column from likely. Why? Because the Democratic Party is backing Raphael Warnock, whereas they were split pretty much between Matt Lieberman and him. But now the Democratic Party is coalescing around this candidate, and it looks like he will be making it into the runoff. And, of course, it will be a competitive race, as Georgia is a competitive state. David Perdue is still likely to win, and it looks like Kelly Loeffler will be the person running off against Raphael Warnock. Both of them are expected to win, but it is possible Doug Collins takes that Republican spot. But then again, that's up to the Republican Party voters in that state. Regardless of who the nominee is going to be, I think that both of them have a very good shot at winning. It'll be a lean margin in terms of margin, but the chance at winning is still pretty high for the Republicans in both of those Senate elections. Now, the 3 remaining races, 2 of them are considered lean. 1 is considered tilt. The 2 that are lean are Maine and North Carolina. Iowa is considered a tilt state. Now, the reason for this is because North Carolina, while, yes, those Cal Cunningham texts may seem as if they could be damning for this election, they really aren't. And, he could not have chosen a better day to announce that those were true. Obviously, he wasn't going to deny it. So the fact that Tom Tillis has recently tested positive for COVID-19 will likely upend the final, or not at least the final, but 2 weeks of the final stretch of the campaign season where he cannot campaign in person or even campaign at all. But North Carolina, lean for Cal Cunningham. He's doing much better than Joe Biden in the state. If Joe Biden wins the state, they're absolutely winning the Senate election. And don't even get me started on the governorship. The Democratic Party is going to do very well in North Carolina this election cycle, winning a Senate race, possibly winning it on the presidential level, and also the the governor's race is pretty solid for the Democrats. And then up in Maine, Sarah Gideon is doing very well against Susan Collins in this state. It is expected to be the closest Senate race, so it should be a closer margin. Now, that's based off 538. I think Iowa will be closer than Maine, but I'm expecting Sarah Gideon to carry Maine's Maine's Senate seat against Susan Collins, who has been in for a very, very long time, since the 90s. But it looks like Gideon's on track to win there. And then in Iowa, the final state, I think Teresa Greenfield will narrowly hold this one against Joni Ernst. Now, I know we just saw that poll that shows Teresa Greenfield ahead by 12%. Undecideds in Iowa typically split for the GOP very heavily, but Teresa Greenfield was at 51% of the vote there. I think she will narrowly win. I don't think it'll be solid. I don't think it'll be likely. I don't think it'll be lean. But the Democrats may narrowly pick up a race there, and I think they are the narrow favorites to win it, which puts them at 51 to 49. A couple race rating changes to this map, nothing fundamentally changing about the numbers, because that's just the American electorate. We're boring. And, things typically don't fluctuate too heavily in the final stretch of the campaign season, but I will get there. I'm thinking of doing a Senate prediction possibly once a week, as we are in the final month before the election. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord link for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch and then a playlist for my 2020 Senate election videos. You can just go ahead and scroll through all of those. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.